Hey guys, thank you for watching my video. This is part 11, and in this part we're going to talk about actually pretty cool stuff. We're going to talk about the system requirements. I know the system requirement topic is very important, and the reason I want to discuss this thing now is the system requirement, not just like a Hyper-V or VMware, hey, you click install. The system requirement for the backup infrastructure. So if I can show you right here in the backup infrastructure, you have a backup proxies, you have a backup repositories, scale out, WAN accelerators. There are some other the requirement which comes under planning and preparation guide. So I'm gonna give you a right here the document which I I like it. Give you a lot of source of information. Um, Unfortunately, that is for a Veeam 9.0. I'm assuming the requirement hasn't changed much. So let's go with that document a little bit right here. This is the a system requirement. For example, make sure the server you plan to use as a backup infrastructure a component meets the requirement listed below. So if we go here first for backup server, so what is backup server is supposed to be? Is the we talking about the hardware, we talking about the OS, we talking about the software, and we talking about the SQL database. Um, Trust me, these options you need to know because in the exam um, you will be quizzed. Let's say, hey, the WAN accelerators or is a backup proxy. They're gonna give you different options, and you have to choose the right option. Especially about the CPU hardware or the OS 64 bits or 32 bits. So you don't need to remember all of these things, but at least for the major components like the major component comes the top one comes like the backup server. So in backup server, the minimum requirement is obviously the 86 or 64 processor. Memory is required for it. I think from my perspective, these are the minimum. So and here is the cool thing is like 4 gig of RAM, GB of RAM plus 500 megabit RAM for each concurrent job. So how many jobs are you gonna run? 10, 20, 30, 40. So depending upon number of concurrent jobs, you have to increase the RAM. That's why where the backup proxies comes in. If your backup server cannot handle it, you install the backup proxies on a different servers, and you can offload your task to that server. So basically, the key part to remember is um, the 500 meg RAM for each concurrent job, and a 64-bit operating system is required. It's not like you can run this thing on a 32 bits version of the operating system. And also, what are the supported one? You have a um, server 2012 R2. So basically 2008 and 2012. And also right here you see if you're talking about R2 SP1 and SP2. So in a in the tests, the practice test, or maybe in the real exam, they may quiz you with they give you like like 4 choices, for example, and for server 2012 R2 2012, or right here, if they take the service pack 1 out and say, hey, which are the options. So you need to remember, hey, if 2008 R2 is supposed to be service pack 1, and is a 2000, if it's just a pure non R2, then you have to have a service pack 2. And also you can run this thing on Windows 10, Microsoft Windows 8.x, Windows 7, Windows 7, but you have to have a service pack. So these are the things you have to remember, and this is just not for the backup server, it's actually for its component too. And right here it says that during the setup, you remember when we were installing it, and it was asking, check was failing, but it was able to install everything for you. So here is the same thing. During setup, the setup program system configuration check to determine if all prerequisite software is available on the machine where you plan to install Veeam backup replication. If some of the required software components are missing, the setup wizard offers you to install missing component automatically. So this is the key. Is like, hey, you don't have to go and download those missing components. This will install it for you. And those components are, for example, .NET Framework, Microsoft Windows Installer, SQL Server Management Object, SQL Server CLR. Because the other day I was trying to install the CLR types for another project, and I was going to the wrong place. It was taking me to the wrong place because I needed for SQL 2016, and somehow it was taking me to SQL, non 2016, and my software was not detecting the newer version CLR side. So what I'm trying to say is, the setup wizard is saving you tons of time by just doing this, installing this missing part for you. So you need to thank Veeam for that one, actually. The only thing you need to know is, before you install this server, the software on a server which requires all this, prerequisites which are being installed, you need to just make sure if you don't have any other software installed on that server, which might not work if these components are installed, for compatibility purposes. So basically, if you have a dedicated box, you don't have to worry about anything. Also, for a SQL database, you can install, like Express Edition, which is included in the setup. This is another important thing to remember. The 2012 SQL Express Edition is included in the setup. And why would you not use that one? And that also is a very, very important question to remember. You might be quizzed in during test, or actually during your production installation. Hey, should we use a SQL? Should we save a license, or we have to buy a like a SQL Server? Is like how big your environment is. If your environment is pretty big, then yes, it's a lot of number of devices. Yes, you go ahead and buy the full version. Otherwise, if it's a small office, then you're good with the Express Edition. And also a couple of things to remember, like, yeah, it does support SQL Server 2005, but SQL Server 2005 is no longer supported for Microsoft. So if you do happen to install with SQL Server 2005 just because of you already have the license, if there is a problem in the future, and you call Veeam, and Veeam says, hey, wait a minute, this is not our issue, this is a SQL Server issue, and you're going to call Microsoft, you're in a bad situation, because Microsoft will not entertain that. So it's better to, depending upon your planning. That's why the planning is very important. Either you can plan it yourself, or you can have the services from Veeam, or you can have a like a professional services people, kind of like me, but so they can help you plan it, because you don't wanna get into a situation where like 6 months down the road, and you say, hey, oops, we need to change our infrastructure. Um, and right here, it says if you plan to back up VMs running Microsoft Server 2012 R2 and data duplication is enabled for some VM volume, it is recommended that you deploy Veeam Backup and Replication Console and mount server on a machine running Microsoft Server 2012 R2 with data deduplication feature enabled. So right here, this is a recommendation, for example. It's not required, just recommendation. So if you want to run a mount server, what is mount server, by the way? Mount server is when you are retrieving data, restoring data, that the data point is mounted on a server. By default, in our lab, our one server is acting, doing all the functionality. But if you have a mount server, that server will be used for that purpose. So they're saying it is like, hey, with the data deduplication feature enabled, if you have a data deduplication feature enabled, then go ahead and make sure, what you call it, um, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What they're saying is the server, if you want to use it, then use the server 2012 with data duplication feature enabled. Otherwise, some type of restore operation of the VM for these VMs, such as Microsoft file level recovery, may fail. So, um, right here they're talking about deduplication enabled. So if you have deduplication enabled for some VM volumes, then you have a 2012. Then you have to have a mount server running on a 2012 R2 with data deduplication feature enabled. I am planning in the future, once I'm done with the Veeam and I have a plan in place to create a videos for on server 2016 with all the features. I know there are 23 features and 23 roles and 60 some features in a new server. So I will be creating a video for each feature actually in a lab environment, their functionality, how to enable it, and it's, for example, like the load balancing, failover cluster. It's just one feature. So imagine how long that's going to last. Anyway, due to limitation, so this is the main point. Due to limitation, Microsoft SQL Server Express can only be used for evaluation purposes or in case of a small scale production environment. So again, they're talking about a lot of VMs. So how much is a lot of VMs? Don't know yet, right? So for environment with lot of VMs, it is necessary to install fully functional version of Microsoft Server. So see, this little important note is going to cost you 2 or 3 points in the exam if you don't remember or don't learn this thing properly. Then we're talking about the Veeam replication console. See, by default, when you install what you call the Veeam replication, it installed on the same server, but you have an option. For example, I'm going to minimize this thing. I'm going to go to a C drive here under download and under right here, and I'm going to mount this thing just for a second, and I'm going to run this setup. And see right here, it says Veeam and replication console is already installed on this machine. But if you run this thing on a separate machine, you don't have to run this console on the same, like your backup server. You can run this thing on any other machine. So when you run this thing on some other machine, that's where they are talking about a they're talking about the console. So whichever machine you want to install console, it is again 64 bits. So we got 2 out of 2. We got a backup server need a 64 bits version, and the console need a 64 bits version. And here disk space is not that disk space is required because it just um, so it's saying 500 megabit for product installation and 4.5 gigabit for Microsoft.NET this installation. So network saying 1 megabit connection to the backup server. high latency and low bandwidth impact user interface responses, and you see that's the problem I'm having right now, because sometimes it gives you a, like a jittery response or latency. So um, this thing is part of the planning actually. So when you're planning, you will know, hey, I'm going to install Veeam backup in the application console on a backup server, or I'm going to install it on in my IT admin's computer, or I'm going to install it somewhere else. Um, so so basically the requirement is the same as far as the CPU and the OS is concerned. It's almost the same thing. Um, um, here you go. And again, the software. I don't think we need to remember the software. But this one is included in the setup. The 4.0 included in the setup. PowerShell 2.0 or later is optional. Firefox blah 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 is or later. So we got two things, right? We got a backup server and we got a backup console. Now we're talking about a backup proxy server. Why we need a proxy server? Just to offload, the work from the backup server. So right here, the funny part is the backup server. Right here, they're saying it could be a 32 bits or 64 bits version of the following operating system. So that's that this thing makes it a little bit difficult, for um, during the exam perspective. I have not seen anybody using 32-bit version of server, um, but right here, if you have a Windows 7 that could be run, 32 bits, Vista could be run, Windows 8, Windows 10 could be run on 32 bits. So that makes it a little bit tricky, like, hey, which one is 32 bits and which one is 64 bits. Right here, for software, for Veeam 5.5 or 6.0 backup proxy server on Microsoft Windows Server 2012 or earlier. See, here it says earlier, not later. So that's the key point. Microsoft, Visual C++, 2008 SP1, or this thing is required. So if you're installing, on Server 2008, you need to do some planning, because and I don't think anybody use. Yeah, there are a lot of people are using it, but if you're using it, that's fine. But if you're starting to implementing Veeam, you better use 2012 or 2016. So the next one is a Um, so that's whenever I say something important or something in the detail, that's where the Veeam asks you, Veeam testing center, they pick up the question or they make the question, because everybody can read all this, can remember all this detail, but when you look into a like a fine print, that's where you need to understand or remember those fine point prints. To protect Veeams running ESXi 5.5 and newer, you must deploy backup proxies on machine running 64 bits of Microsoft Windows. VDDK 5.5 and newer does not support 32-bit version of Microsoft Windows. So here you go. So when you're deploying a backup proxies right here, even though it's supported here like 32 bits, but on a vSphere 5.5 and 5.6, you have to have a 64 bits. So this makes it more trickier actually. Hey, on one side they're saying, hey, we support 32 bits. On the second hand, it's saying, by the way, if you're running your machine on 5.5 or later, we're not supporting 32 bits. So that's why I don't understand. Why don't you take this 32 bits limit out? I mean, to make people life easier. But I guess this is a making it compatible with wide range of software and hardware. So that's why they're making it backward compatible. Maybe somewhere in third world countries they're still using the 32 bits and they need the Veeam software. Anyway, so now it comes to a backup repository server. Backup repository server, and this one also could be 32 bits or 64 bits. And same thing, this one says 2 gigabit and the requirement 4 gig of RAM, 1 gigabit or faster connection. I think these are almost the same setting as the console. Um, as far as this the RAM or the network speed is concerned. So right here is 32 bits. So now we got two 64 bits and two 32, 232 supporting 232 bits. Uh, um, Again, if you plan to use Microsoft Windows Backup Repository with data deduplication, make sure to set a Microsoft server correctly. For more information, click over here. So probably these notes, the KB article came when somebody installed it. And something went wrong. So they called the Veeam, so Veeam has to actually create a note for future installation. And now we talk about the WAN accelerator. This one is definitely 64 bits, and you must have to remember this thing. Hey, the WAN accelerator will only support 64 bits version, because you will be quizzed. And again here it was saying, hey, because what WAN accelerator does, it's for WAN, backup or copy or replication job. It does a deduplication or compression or its own mechanism to help transfer the data faster. They say it saves like 50% of bandwidth or something, or make it faster. Um, so what I'm trying to say is like, right here, like it needs 8 gigabit of RAM. So that's the only one need 8 gig, because the other one is need 4. Here are 2, 2, and 4. So and here's it says 10 10 gigabit of, not that's the different thing. Okay, so the WAN accelerator is the only one which need the recommended is 8 gig of RAM. And again, it seems like everything can run on everything basically. This is all the same. Then you have a backup target. The backup target can be performed on the following disk storage: the local, which has the internal backup repository server, direct attached DAS connected storage area, SAN, and a EMC data domain. So let's see what we're talking about here. So and here they don't talk about anything. This is just the backup target. So backup target, they're not talking about the CPU, because that's the backup target where you're going to be storing it. So I think we went through this thing like EMC, VNX, and VNX2. Um, like a storage integration. We talked about this thing in previous video. Like they need a iSCSI for remote connectivity, and this is the local, for example, and the HP3 Power, Store Serve, HP Store Virtual, left hand P4000. I think I mentioned it. They might put like 6000. Just a quiz if you guys remember or not. And the other thing is the important thing to remember. It's a the hard the tape. What tape does it support? So that's the tape. You need to remember this thing, LTO3. I know LTO3 came in probably in 20 years ago, not 20 years ago, probably 16 years ago, because I remember replacing the tapes with LTO3, so for a long time ago. So this the LTO3 or later tapes are supported, and a um, that's the one for, as for the software is concerned, for tape. That's none of our business. Talk to the install vendor specific OEM driver for Windows device without such drivers. Install will appear in Windows Manager as unknown or generic, and require enabling native SCSI commands mode. If multiple driver installation modes are available for your device, use the one that allow for multiple open handles. from a host to a drive to exist at the same time. Let me say it again. If multiple driver installation modes are available for your tape device, use the one that allow for multiple open handles from a host to a drive to exist at the same time. For example, if your tape vendor provide exclusive and non-exclusive drives, you should install the non-exclusive one. No other backup server must be interacting with the tape devices. So this is another very important point to remember. Hey, you need to know what is exclusive and non-exclusive. If you need to install it, choose the non-exclusive one, because that's the one is recommended right here and required. And by the way, you cannot use the tapes for like a multi-purpose. Like you see, hey, I'm using it with Veeam and I'm not useful so I'm doing a Windows backup. So that's not must not be interacting with the tape device. So next one is right here, tape server. We know we installed tape server on the same, our backup server. And again, right here, disk space or RAM or this thing, yeah, these are just standard. But this one, it support both 32 bits and 64 bits. So for example, if they ask you, hey, we have a 32-bit system and we need to install a tape server and a WAN accelerator, is it true or false? I mean, will it work? So obviously for WAN accelerator, it's totally 64 bits. And then you have a gateway server. Actually, in our upcoming videos, we're gonna enable all these functions. Actually, the gate server, tape server, a backup server, proxy server, all these things. So the platform now here that see here that it's like here hardware was CPU, right? It didn't mention this could be a virtual machine or physical machine or or no. Right here now they're saying a gateway server could be physical or virtual machine. They are not talking about the CPU here. Why? Figure it out. For OS, again, the OS is a 64 bits and 32 bits. For gateway server, there is no RAM requirement. There's nothing. You just make it physical or virtual machine, and you're good. And again, 32-bit, 64-bit. See, Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager, we installed it on the same server. We have everything on one server actually. Right here it says need a 4 gig of RAM, and here they're talking about the processor, same 86 or 64, and right here is a 64-bit, absolutely 64-bit. So this one and the WAN accelerator is 100% 64 bits. There's no 32 bits available, and the rest is standard. The Veeam Backup Search Server. You remember when we were talking about the search? You can have a dedicated search server. You can have a SQL Express. You can have a SQL. These were the options in a Veeam Enterprise Manager. So right here it says, hey, refer to the corresponding Microsoft Search Server version system requirement, and depending what kind of things you're using from Microsoft. So use their recommendation. For example, software is a Search 2008 and Microsoft Search Server 2010, including Express Edition. Hey, there's a very important things to remember here. Is like these requirements are for Veeam 9.0. So in 9.5, some requirement might be changed. I know it's not the big a jump. Normally, if there is a big difference between a version, so normally they do a like between the version 8 and version 9 is a huge difference. But normally from version 9.1 to 9.2, it's not the big thing. So I'm not sure how much is the difference between 9 and 9.5, other than new feature and new enhancement. So we're gonna go back here for Veeam Explorer for Active Directory. For this thing to work, it says Microsoft Active Directory Domain Controller could be anything basically, because nobody's using 2000 actually, server 2000. So it could be 2003, 2008, 2008, 2000. So 2016 is not here. but I know from 9.5 they are actually enabling in 2016. So so basically, if I'm not mistaken, you can just think like, hey, 2003 and later. Um, Minimum supported domain and forest trust is 2003. This is another important thing to remember, because you can have a server 2012 Active Directory domain, but your functional level, can be different, because some software still requires, and especially in the healthcare industries, they don't support Server 2012 functionality. For Epic, it's one, which is the pain, because Epic still support like 2008 R2. So there might be some software they don't support, so you just need to know. The data files created by domain controller running Microsoft Server 2012 or Microsoft Server 20 R2 can be opened only if Veeam Explorer Active Directory is installed on the machine with the same OS or Windows 2000 with 2008 8.8.x basically. So what are they saying? They're saying it if you install your um, domain controller on 2012, and your Veeam Explorer is installed on a machine on a non 2008 or 2000 or Windows 8.x. Basically, I think if you install on Windows 7, for example, then this functionality will not work. So at one point right here, if you see it, right here, for example, they give you the option, right? Hey, you can install this operating system on a, not this particular operating system, on we support on Windows 7, but when it comes to a Active Directory, and if Active Directory is 2012, they say, hey, by the way, if Veeam Explorer is running on Windows 7, it will not work. So the bottom line is, or the message is, when you are planning, make sure you are trying to use the latest operating system. Same thing as Veeam Explorer for Exchange, because the Exchange came out, like a while ago, 2016. So in 9.0 they had the support. So, but here they don't support 2003. So they support Exchange 2016, 2013, 2010 minimum service pack 1, and there are also people still using Exchange 2007 actually. So if you have Exchange 2007, I guess you're out of luck. Microsoft Outlook 2010 or later. So this is on the client side. You have to have a 2010 or later. I mean, if you have a off Outlook 2007, it's not be supported. Basically what they're saying it's not be supported. Basically they're saying it's a 64-bit for PSD export. So what the PSD export is like, you go to the mailbox if you need to retrieve items. You have an option to create a PSD, all those messages into a PSD file. Obviously, you have an option to restore, restore item to the original location, or you can create a PSD file. So in this case, with the Outlook 2010, or the PSD exports are optional. And same thing is for Veeam SharePoint is 2013, 2010. I'm not sure. They should be supporting a for SharePoint 2016. I have on my lab SharePoint 2016 installed, so I will check. Same thing SQL. SQL is also like 2016 is available. I'm not sure if 9.5 supports or not. Most likely it does. Unfortunately, I have to rely on this document for now. And for Veeam Explorer for Oracle, it's 32 bits and 64 bits. See here, these guys are not talking about any, operating system. They're talking about the version right here, right? But for Oracle, they're talking about a 32 bits and 64 bits right here. So the same thing, Oracle, Microsoft System 2003, ESP2, blah blah blah, Linux. So they are also supporting non-Microsoft systems. Oracle system can run on this one. So that's the end for this chapter. Actually, this was updated on 11/29. 11/29 means right after the Veeam 9.5 was released. You know. Anyway, uh, so guys, it's almost over 35 minutes, and this is one of the important topics. So please go through with this thing. I know as far as the operation is concerned, one time Veeam is set up, you don't have to do anything other than just click to restore machine if everything's working fine. But again, for the solution architect, pre-sales guys, and the people who want to be a Veeam certified, and a people who provide professional services, you have to go through with this thing and try to remember as much as you can. And if you like this video, please subscribe my channel. Um, and I do appreciate your time. And if you have any feedback, please do let me know. I will try to improve. And thank you very much. And see you in the next video.